Now, the first thing that you have to keep in mind is that when you're looking at gesture in terms of looking at compositional drawings, but this is all really the same now, is that if we look at the drawings there, is that when he's doing the drawing, he is concerned with how one line leads into another. So this is exactly what I do. If you look at any of my gesture drawings, you'll find that I'm always focusing on how the eye leads. So as we're going through at this point in the drawing, and it's very clear when you look at him now, that he's just talking about how one thing works into the next, and there's no real effort at any kind of detail. It's just feeling the go for the total. So as you're going through the drawings, you look at some of these secondary figures. In other words, if you go over here and look at the figure, look at this figure way over in the corner, there's nothing there. It's just a very, very simple line. There's a hand going out and something like that, and maybe a little bit of tone. And also, part of this process of taking and capturing the total, in other words, this is really what maybe we should be saying, we'll keep talking about gesture drawing. Well, why don't we just call it capturing the total drawing? Because that's what you're doing. So even look at the secondary lines here, in other words, coming through behind in here, all of this stuff is leading the eye coming through. It's to get the total. So when you're composing and when you're drawing a gesture, so that as you're doing the drawing, you're focusing on using the lines to take and move the eye. And that's what when you're doing is when you're composing a picture, and that's why we look at the drawings of the old masters there, and all of the preliminary drawings are compositional drawings. That's what they are. They're taking in, everything was done as working. So they were taking, as the drawings were being done, we look at them, say, as like gesture drawings, but they weren't gesture drawings. They were compositional sketches that would take and communicate the idea. They did nothing that wasn't work related. It was all work related. And so that the most free, rough sketches that you look at were taking and thinking and designing and creating, making the eye move from one thing to the other. So this is the point. So when you look at the drawings, you're looking at, and this is really the whole point, is that all of these drawings now that we're looking at were all done from imagination. They were not working with models. They weren't doing gesture drawings. They were doing compositional drawings. And that's what we're dealing with all the time. So that as you're taking and drawing, and myself, is that how I developed the way I draw was by taking and developing compositions. But I've gone back and looked at the old masters and saw how they worked. So it's all derived from having looked at these guys and gals and taking and trying to understand their compositions. But when I was drawing, I wasn't thinking of that. I wasn't thinking of how do you do a drawing. I was just drawing to try to understand the composition. I was going for the total. Well, that has become my particular approach to taking and doing gesture drawing. So that when you're taking and constantly taking and leading the eye from one thing to the next, you naturally get a feeling for a movement. You get it, you focusing on a total, because I'm constantly, people say, well, your drawings are moving so. Well, of course they are. I'm making the eye move. So as you go through these drawings, then you can see how we, just go over this a little bit here. But you can look at these lines. You can see the flow. He's building it up. There's rhythm. There's movement. The lines he's taking and going through. Everything is building up, even into the backgrounds, the sky. Everything is orchestrated to take and create a sense of movement within the eye. It's a building, it's creating a dramatic effect that is, all the lines are summing up to create that movement. Okay, let's take a look at the next drawing. This Pontormo drawing now. This is a good example because this obviously this is drawn from imagination. But as you look at the drawing now, you can see he's taking, and it's a very strange drawing, and it's actually quite small. I have a facsimile drawing print of this, and the whole drawing horizontally across is about maybe 10 or 11 inches. So what you're seeing on your screen is probably close to actual size. Now, as you look at the figures in the back here, let's start in the back. Up in the upper right-hand corner, for instance, you can see, look at this, what he's doing here. These are just very, very simple, almost a crude kind of construction. Here we get, it's almost like a happy face, or actually it's a frown on there. But you can see the way the lines are building up. So as we're drawing these figures then, the lines, he's constantly weaving. He's got really huge figures. He's got those things that are way out of scale coming through. But it's trying to feel flows. And you can see the lines underside. Look at these lines here. You can feel how the lines are going. You can see how he's moving. He's changed arms, moving around. You can see some graphite type lines that we're taking and showing the flow of the figure. So it's a process here is in taking and looking at one of these drawings. What you're doing is you're looking at the thinking process. You're actually visualizing every time you go over the drawing, in other words, when you start to go through, you can see what he was thinking. As you're doing the drawing, you're experiencing exactly what he was thinking. In other words, if you go through and just talk to yourself and say, oh, this head is turned and looking that way, and you're in the area. Now you can see look at this strange large arm that's coming through. Pontormo was credited with one of the first artists to do what we would call psychological drawing. Here I look at this figure coming down here, and the way that leg turns into the hip of the other figure. But you start to feel these lines, and it's trying to figure out, now, what was this guy imagining when he was doing this? What is he doing? You look at it, but you look now, as I look at this, I can feel the lines going through. This figure is turned completely around now, and we've got figures going up, but that's going right along now with this movement that's taking and going, the way the head's going up. So as you're doing the drawing, then you're experiencing, as you're going back and looking at these things, you're experiencing the actual creative elements that were involved in the creation of that thing. But as students in drawing, it's important now we look at it and say, yeah, he's got these strange twisting figures going on through here. But that's not the point. The point is that to look at the process of how he actually did the drawing, what were the stages, how did he approach it, And the key to this then is that he was focusing on what we would refer to as the aesthetics. I mean, maybe that's jumping a little too philosophically here, but aesthetics is the art experience. And so that when you're doing a gesture, you are taking, and is what Pontormo was doing in his drawing, he was creating an experience. So a simple gesture drawing then is taking and creating the experience that you are experiencing when you're looking at a figure. Your gesture drawing is recreating, or I should say, is creating an experience that tells you and lets your audience feel the actions of that figure. And it's much more than trying to do a photographic. It's not a question of, is this a good drawing or is that a bad drawing? Does it communicate the action? Now, this drawing by Nicolas Poussin, again, it's the whole, look at the way it's done. Now, Poussin was noted for being an incredibly meticulous organizer. Everything was absolutely in perspective. The drawing was right down to the nitty-gritty. He was a classicist, and he was considered the epitome of taking and being of a thorough artist, working out everything. But look at this is where drawing starts. Now, this would be look very comfortable in a series of animation preliminary sketches. I myself have done them. You could take and they could be passed as rough animation drawings or story-based sketches. So when you're looking at these drawings, see, you can get the feeling of looking down, the ones down here, you can see where you're just going over the surface, pulling down, get full. What? There's nothing there. There's no anatomy. It's action, and this is the key point now. When I say there's no anatomy, there's only the action. Okay, when you're drawing the action, not the anatomy.